Hello friends, this is Odds, at least until the contract expires, and today we're going to talk about the strongest perks in Dead by Daylight for both sides. I've put them together in this tier list, and that's it. Feel free to screenshot it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next... Nah, just kidding. We're going to talk about this for an hour. Alright, so the point of making this video is to help newer players that are understanding the meta, and people that have taken a little break that are not keeping up with all of the latest updates, to know which perks they need to bring to have the best chance to win, and which perks they'll expect the other side to bring, and why exactly are they so strong, to maybe help you play around them and use them better yourself. So, with that in mind, am I going to go over every single perk in this tier list, the 200 plus? No, I'm not going to do that. Last time I did that, it took me 16 hours to get through them, and now there's even more, so I'm doing that some other time. Instead, we'll be focusing on the top few perks and explaining why they condition the entire game and they shape the meta. First, we'll start with Killer, then with Survivor, and timestamps are below, of course, if you want to skip to whatever part you're interested in. Also below, you'll find this tier list in image form in case you want to have them somewhere to quickly check on them when you're unlocking stuff. As an addendum to that, my Discord has a bunch of other images like this that I put together. So feel free to also find it in the description and join up, and you'll find a lot more stuff like this if you're interested. Now, let's get started with Killer. This is roughly what the Killer tier list looks like. Many of these perks can definitely shine on some killers here and there. Some of them are more conditional than others, and it was difficult to play some of them. I have to say that almost every perk in the game here has some kind of niche scenario where it can be all right, but that's what it looks like to me. One thing worth mentioning though is Shadowborn. At the bottom right, you'll notice that Shadowborn is classified with a bunch of question marks, and it's because this perk is very subjective. This perk increases your field of view so that you can see better around yourself. For people like me, it does basically nothing and it's a worthless perk. For some other folks, it lets them play better, and obviously then it's the best perk in the game for them. So it's completely subjective. You know, don't let me tell you how you feel about this perk. Now, focusing on the top echelon of killer perks, what do we have? Arguably, the strongest perk in the game is Pain Resonance. Pain Resonance is a perk that when you hook a Survivor on a Scourge hook, and there will be 4 of them, maybe more in basement, depending if you also bring Monster Shrine. When you hook them on a white hook, the gem with most progress will explode and lose 15%, and then begin to regress if no one's on it. If someone's on it, they will be kicked. Survivors want to avoid being kicked, so sometimes they'll let go of a generator to avoid the scream and avoid Deadman Switch. And when they do this, they also have a chance to get a skill check and miss it. So the fact that survivors let go of gens to avoid this perk already hurts their efficiency and sometimes slaps them with a minus 10% on a generator just by this perk existing, even if it's not there. So Pain Res is an annoying perk for survivors to deal with. If you keep hooking people, as a killer, you are not guaranteed to get results. With this perk, you kind of are though. If you're playing, let's say, I don't know, let's say you're playing Myers and you hook Survivor 1, then you hook Survivor 2, then you hook Survivor 3, then you hook Survivor 4. At this point, you're losing the game. You have spent too much time focusing on different survivors. The gens are probably nearly done, and no one's there on hook. You will never be able to kill anyone in time. By the time the gates are open, 3 of them are going to waltz out of there and you'll be left stuck in your thumb. With Pain Resonance, that changes. If you keep contesting the same area and you keep hooking people and trading hooks on the same hook, you will constantly be slapping gens with minus 15, minus 15, minus 15 with no cooldown at all. And it can be very, very cruel. It also has nice synergies with Deadman Switch, we will talk about later. So this perk and another perk can regress gens and then make those gens lose progress. Very, very nasty stuff. But perhaps the most insidious part about Pain Resonance it's not the fact that anyone can use it and that you can use it to keep up with the game. It's the fact that it's a perk that makes you win more. If you're already winning, the survivors have a very, very slim chance of a comeback with Pain Res constantly hitting gens. If you're playing a very aggressive killer or survivors made a few mistakes and they are trading on hook, you don't need to go around and kick gens. You don't need to go around and find the right person. You can just constantly trade hooks and constantly put them through a meat grinder of sorts that just passively makes gens regress while you're doing your job. That alone makes this perk really, really scary. And the fact that it works best on the strongest killers in the game goes without saying, is what probably makes it one of the strongest perks in the game. The downsides of this perk is that it can sometimes backfire when you don't have enough Scorch hooks, and some maps do make it a bit difficult. So it's by far possibly, it's not by any means the strongest, most powerful perk that's ever existed in this game, but it is maybe arguably the best killer perk that we have right now. Next up is Eruption, a perk from Nemesis that is honestly really difficult to understand how strong it is until you've seen it in action. When you kick a generator, and this can apply to multiple generators, that gen gets erupted and stays yellow. When you later down a survivor, those gens affected by Eruption will explode, lose -10%, begin to regress, and here's the kicker: if a survivor was touching that generator, that survivor has the very rare incapacitated status effect for 25 seconds. Survivors that are incapacitated cannot do anything productive. As long as you're not chasing them or something like that, survivors can do nothing. They cannot heal, they cannot use items, they cannot do gens, they cannot do bones, they can do almost nothing. And don't forget, this can affect multiple people at once. Eruption is not a perk that helps the lower tier killers win a game immediately. In fact, sometimes it doesn't help them at all, but it's the kind of perk that allows the stronger killers that down people very constantly to absolutely dominate and control 3 gens very tightly. Even in tournaments where people are warning each other that they're going to go down, this perk is still really powerful. Don't forget, -10% is one thing on its own, but it can be applied on multiple gens as well. So as I said, when you are worrying about a 3 gen, the last 3 generators left, defending them with this perk becomes really viable. And if survivors are hit by the 25% incapacitated, your time efficiency is really good. You hook that survivor, you go back, you kick it again. There's basically nothing they can do. This perk also has decent synergies with some other perks that revolve around kicking generators as well. So yeah, Eruption is kind of ridiculous. If you know that a gen's not going to be finished in your face, this perk will give you value. And if you suspect that a gen is about to be finished in your face, with this, they won't be able to quickly do it if you get it down early enough. Very powerful perk. We then have Deadlock, and Deadlock can shine more or less depending on the circumstances, but what is really easy to argue is just how universal and how easy it is to use. If I could have one perk on every killer and not worry about picking that perk ever again, it would probably be Deadlock. When a generator is completed, the next generator with most progress available will be locked for 30 seconds, and unless it's bugged, which it shouldn't be, that generator doesn't move up or down for those 30 seconds. That is huge. That is absolutely huge. If you can influence survivors to split up on different gens by harassing them when they're grouped up on gens, and then they have to deal with Deadlock, especially if they're not on comms and they cannot rotate quickly, this perk can be extremely mean. Even in a game where everything is going wrong, your chases are being slow, the hooks are just not happening, this perk, more than any other perk in the game, will just protect you from losing even faster, which is really nice. Yeah, on top of that, it also gives you information passively and actively in a way. If a generator next to you is at 25% and then another generator pops and that generator gets locked, that is telling you that every other gen available is not above 25%, because if it was, Deadlock would have hit that instead. Also, if a gen gets locked away from you, you can actually see the aura of Deadlock blocking it. So you get information from this perk and delay. It's great. It's really great. It also helps many of the killers that have difficult synergies. Killers like Hunters that can't use certain perks, you can always slap Deadlock on them. Killers like Trapper who need passive slowdown and don't have the luxury of wasting time, they get value from it. It's just a great perk. The major downside of Deadlock, there are times where Deadlock will block the wrong gen, or it will just delay survivors a little bit if they know how to rotate between gens. So Deadlock can also sometimes be not so useful. And the 30 seconds can, survivor can just heal, can rotate to another gen. It can sometimes feel like nothing, depending on the circumstances, but if you are playing right, it should be a major hindrance. We then move on to No Way Out. Arguably, No Way Out, I think, would have been the best or one of the best perks in the game, like top 1 or top 2 or top 3 a little while ago. Because No Way Out has a massive effect on endgame. And back then, when it came out and it was buff, the hook states of survivors were predictable 60 seconds and they're dead. So you could strategically camp. Now with Reassurance and some other perks, it is a bit more difficult to use this, but still, it is a powerful perk. This perk, by default, will make the exit gates take 12 extra seconds to be open, and tell you when an exit gate is being touched. And then every time you hook a survivor, that 12 goes to 24, goes to 36, goes to 48, goes to up to 1 minute. 1 minute of extra slowdown is insanely good. Insanely good. Even if you don't have Noid, which you can, even if you don't have any crazy plan, an extra minute can help you get one extra hook, kill a guy, and then get kills on top of that. This perk, if you play it right, can almost always guarantee that you have a chance to get an extra kill or two. Also, if you get 3 kills and close the hatch with this perk on, you will almost never, pretty much never lose the 4th guy. So it's a perk that makes you win from 3 kills guaranteed 4 if you close the hatch. Very, very mean stuff, and obviously goes well with anything else that's related to the endgame. Yeah, that's it. Needless to say, almost any killer can use it as well, which is a major plus. We then have Corrupt Intervention, a perk that used to be perhaps the strongest perk in the game, that is also really, really strong right now. And people sleep on this perk. It got nerfed a little bit, and people seem to have forgotten about it. It's still one of the best perks in the game. When you spawn, the 3 furthest generators from your spawning location get blocked by the entity. And this only goes away after 2 minutes, which is a very long time, or if you get it down early. Now, some killers never get it down early, like Trapper, like Hag, sometimes Myers. So on those killers, this perk is easily the best perk they can bring. Or one of the best perks they can bring. So for those killers, it's a no-brainer. Corrupt Intervention is amazing. But what about a normal killer? What about a killer that sometimes does get down within 2 minutes? It's still really, 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 really good. If you get it down in 1 minute, I guarantee you survivors have already begun to spread out, and they've already begun to rotate, and they've already been bothered by Corrupt Intervention. And don't forget, if you get it down in a minute, that's awesome. So Corrupt Intervention is still really, really good. It forces survivors to go around. If survivors have Prove Thyself, other strong toolboxes and ideas to do gens quickly upon their spawn, they can no longer do that easily. Sometimes if it's an indoor map, they will not find a gen for ages because they're hard to find, and then you find one that's corrupted. And in bigger maps, they actually have to traverse a lot of distance to find the actual gens that they can work on. So bigger maps, which are a weakness for many killers, indoor maps, which are a weakness for many killers, this perk helps tremendously, and it's really, really good. And even if you get it down very, very quick, I guarantee you most of the damage from Corrupt Intervention is already done to the survivor strategy. So you should 100% still run it. It is a really, really good perk. And my only caveat is that maybe it could be even higher than this. And that's it for the very, very strong perks in the 5-star category. We then move on to the 4-star category. And what do we have here? We have some of the best information perks in the game, like Tinkerer, which also gives Undetectable, which is awesome. We have Discordance, which gives you information and also has many synergies with many other perks and add-ons, because finding groups of survivors is good for many killers. And we have Lethal Pursuer, which is a perk that lets you know where everyone spawns, which is great, and also extends the orders of other perks. So these are easily some of the best info perks in the game. Then we also have perks that are not the strongest by themselves, but shine on certain killers a lot, like Starstruck, which, for example, is not very good on an average killer, but is very, very strong on Nurse, for instance, or Merciless Storm, a perk that is quite okay, but not super strong, until you put on Artist or Doctor or a few other killers with certain builds that can make it really, really, really powerful. We also have Noid, an amazing perk that will let you make big, big comebacks at the end of the game. We'll probably go down in the future a little bit, but we'll talk about that later. Save the best for last, an amazing perk with some risks, but an amazing perk regardless, that allows you to shorten your chases in the mid to late game and has insane synergies with many, many killers. Calobrine, a perk that allows you to kick gens and have them regress faster than usual. If you kick a gen and they take 20 seconds to come back to it, normally they would only take 5 seconds to undo that. So think about it. For 20 seconds lost, minus the 2.5%, for 20 seconds lost, they need to work on it for 5 seconds. With this perk, they need to work on it for 10 seconds. And it also synergizes a bunch with many, many other perks. We have Jolt, super simple perk that works really, really well on M1 type killers that attack that down with their basic attack. It has the weakness of not working in the larger maps as much, but also the upside of working very well in indoor maps. Deadman Switch, an amazing perk that is very punishing for solo players, especially if you make survivors get off from gens these gens will be blocked for 30 seconds. This works extremely well with Deadman Switch and with certain passive abilities from killers like Artist or Doctor, who can kick people off gens by force with their power. Sloppy Butcher, pretty great effect of slowing down heals and interrupting heals will make their progress go away. Devour Hope, one of the few perks that will make all survivors stop what they're doing to deal with it, and has some other interesting synergies. Floods of Rage, also another amazing information perk. Undying, a perk that can help protect other hexes and make Pentimento even stronger. Pentimento itself, a perk that is extremely oppressive, one of the strongest perks in the game if you get it to work. And oftentimes you can, by forcing survivors to deal with annoying totems. Pop Goes the Weasel, people sometimes raise their eyebrow, but I do think that Pop Goes the Weasel is still fairly strong if you place it on the right bill. And Franklin's, which against certain teams can honestly really cripple them if they rely on their medkits and their flashlights and so on quite a bit. On the right killer, it can be quite strong. So these are some of the strongest perks that you see on the killer side, and we've covered most of them. Blood Favor is also an amazing chase perk that is quite underrated. On the right killer, it can be very devastating. Also helps in some of the indoor maps where pallets are stacked on different floors, because one hit will block almost every pallet available. And now we move on to the Survivor Perk tier list, which is, I think, a little bit simpler to describe than the killer one, because there's only one type of survivor. There's not like 30 different killers, you know. There's only, survivors all play the same, so the perks are a little bit easier to judge. Though I also think that it's difficult to judge some of these perks individually, because many of these perks are team value perks that really only shine when one person brings them to help the entire team. So let's talk about the strongest one. Unlike killer, I can say without hesitation that the #1 spot on this list is by far the strongest perk. The other ones, I don't even think come nearly as close. The strongest perk for survivors right now, I really truly believe, is Off the Record, a shareable perk from Zarina. Off the Record is almost 3 perks in one. When you become unhooked, and it's not the end game, clear distinction there, it's not the endgame, you get 3 different effects. 2 of them stay on forever, for 80 seconds, and the other one stays unless you do a conspicuous action like touching a gen or healing yourself. So the 2 effects that linger on forever is the fact that you have Iron Will, you have no grunts of pain, so your voice when injured, you're completely quiet, which is insanely good against many killers, particularly killers like Spirit, but still very good overall. You also are completely invisible to auto reading, so you have a little cloak of invisibility protected against auto reading, which is also very strong. This helps against barbecue and chili, it helps against bitter murmur, it helps against any auto reading perk, and also many strong add-ons like Amanda's Letter, Compound 21, Foggy Lens on Pinhead. Many add-ons on killer make you aura appear and make you vulnerable. This perk counters all of those for 80 whole seconds. But the most important part is that it also makes you, it gives you the endurance status effect. It lets you tank an extra hit. And this works twice. It's not like Decisive, where it goes away if you use it. This works twice. So what this means, essentially, is that Off the Record gives you protection from aura, protection from noise, and gives you 1 extra health state for 80 seconds twice. If a killer wants to down you, they have to catch you once, then twice, then once, then twice, then once, then twice, assuming that you don't even heal. And you can have other people heal you and you still have this perk. So you could become unhooked, get healed quickly, or heal yourself with inner strength, which doesn't count as a conspicuous action or something like that. And then bam, you now have 3 health states absolutely for free. This perk is really good. If this perk is on everyone, you don't need borrowed time for the middle or early game, and the killer cannot tunnel you effectively. It is very useful, and it just does so much. It just does so much. Again, if every survivor runs this perk, the killer can never even think of tunneling efficiently in any way whatsoever, especially if it's a killer that actually struggles to catch up to you in chase. So yeah, that perk is just insane. We then have Unbreakable, and Unbreakable is one of those perks that many people, they also raise their eyebrow. You know, they'll go and say things like, oh, Otzdarva, I don't think it's that good. I ran Unbreakable for 10 games and I never got slugged. Ask yourself, why do you never get slugged? The concept here that is key to understand this is the passive deterrence that this perk provides. And passive deterrence is a term I made up to explain how certain perks modify the behavior of the other side. The reason that the killers never slug you is because they are afraid of this perk. They want to avoid this perk, even if it's not there. There's many times when a killer could leave you on the ground and then go for someone else and maybe win the game based on that play alone, but they can't do that. They can't do that because they are afraid that if you have Unbreakable, you will pick yourself up in 24 seconds. This perk is insane. It is so strong. Picking yourself up in 24 seconds or being 99 in 24 seconds is so powerful, especially if you're not playing solo and you play as a team. If you play as a team, you can have a guy come take 2 hits for you and then pick himself up and then take another hit for you in chase to really make it difficult for a killer to tunnel you out of the game. It can also help if you play against a Starstruck nurse or some other very aggressive killer that quickly gets multiple downs. Suddenly you could go from disaster to completely under control situation. If you have 2 people with Unbreakable in a team, there will never be a situation where everyone gets slugged and no one can do anything. So this perk is really strong, and if in the next patch certain updates come to pass in the future, it could be even stronger, but we'll get to that later. Either way, Unbreakable is powerful, and it's powerful in more way than just one. It's not just what it does, it's what it forces the killer to do. You can have Noid as a killer and get 3 downs and go for the 4th guy, and if they have a single Unbreakable, now you're sweating that all of that can be undone. So yeah, Unbreakable is very strong, more so the threat of it than the actual execution sometimes. The way it conditions killers to play. Just look at it a different way. If this perk didn't exist, the other ways to pick yourself up are simply not that good. Exponential, difficult to set up, only works in area. Soul Guard requires a Hex. No Mither, it's no Mither. There is no other way in the game right now to pick yourself up on command throughout the game like Unbreakable. And that's what makes it so good. We then have Adrenaline, and Adrenaline is a really sneaky perk. It hasn't changed very much. In fact, it hasn't changed at all in years. So why is it so good now? The reason Adrenaline is so good is because Off the Record is so strong as well. Off the Record protects you during the middle game up until the 5 gens, right? So if a killer is tunneling you and trying to kill you, you will use Off the Record to take multiple hits and not go down. And if you then survive to the end game, bam, you no longer have Off the Record, but now you have Adrenaline. Having multiple Adrenalines in the team is really time efficient and really scary. And really scary for the killer. And the reason why is very simple. You simply cannot keep up with multiple Adrenalines and tunnel someone effectively if they come out of a hook with Adrenaline and they go full health and speed boost. So yeah, let's talk about all the things that Adrenaline does. Number 1, if you're playing against Freddy, it wakes you up. Pretty big deal. If you are currently in chase, even if you're on the ground, Adrenaline will give you 1 health state and give you a speed boost. If the killer now takes 20 seconds to catch you, that is 20 seconds that your teammates have to potentially open the doors and make sure that everyone gets out. If you're on the hook and you come out of with Adrenaline, you will be fully healed. And obviously you'll be so fast that the killer will never really be able to stop you for the most part. So, and not to mention that if you have 3 people injured and the last gen is about to pop and you're like all really focused on making the last gen pop, you save a significant amount of time on those heals. If everyone is healthy in the late game, the killer can knock quickly down people and try to slug and try to harass people out of the gate. If everyone is healthy, everyone can come and take a hit. Everyone can come and rescue safely. Everyone can take 1 hit and delay the killer for 20 seconds until the gates are open. And that's the really scary part. You could have 4 people injured as a killer, think that you're in a really good spot because they each need 32 seconds or 16 seconds to heal, and then bam, they do the last gen, all of them healthy, all of them spring into action. With Off the Record and Adrenaline, you have a wombo combo of being basically invincible. If you get tunneled early on, Off the Record protects you. If you make it to the end game, Adrenaline gives you a second chance to still last a long time. That's what makes it so strong ultimately. We then have Deliverance, and Deliverance is another one of those perks that has a big component of passive deterrence, where the killer is scared to hook multiple people at the same time because one, or even camp a person that's on their first stage, because one well-timed Deliverance could be so powerful and so impactful for the course of the game. Deliverance is also one of those perks that people really don't like because it feels bad to use it and then waste it, right? You use Deliverance, you get caught first, you get hooked first. Perk is a waste of a choice. I understand that. I totally understand that. And you should never run this perk as a solo player because, you know, Murphy's Law, you're going to get caught first. But Deliverance is still an amazing, insanely powerful perk that counters many, many playstyles and has potential to completely destroy the killer. The killer typically wants to tunnel a survivor out of the game, get them killed as soon as possible, focus on them as much as you can. But if you do that, you have off the record. So sometimes as a killer, the best idea is to hook a person and then hook someone else and then hook someone else and try to keep it all up and keep the chases short. This is where Deliverance is insanely, insanely powerful. If you hook a person with Deliverance, they will be able to unhook themselves. If you decide to camp them, they could sit on the hook for 59 seconds, then unhook themselves, and then if you hit them, they have base kit BT. So someone can unhook themselves and basically be invincible for 10 straight seconds, even in endgame situations, and there's nothing you can do as a killer. Nothing you can do. So camping a person that might have this perk is extremely, extremely scary for the killer. Could backfire hugely. If you stick around around the person on the hook, you also have 3 other folks that if they're all on comms will be doing gens. If I'm going down in the corner of the map and I have Deliverance, I'm going to tell my friends, stay on the gens, stay on the gens. And then 3 people will be on 3 different gens. The killer will go away. They'll catch one of them. And then I'll unhook myself and sit on a gen as well. And now we have 3 people doing gens at any given time. That is so powerful and so difficult to stop for the killer. Floods of Rage doesn't trigger with Deliverance. Devour Hope, a very strong killer perk, doesn't get stacks with Deliverance. There are so many stupid perks that killers sometimes bring that are really, really strong, and nope, they just get countered by this. It is really, really disgusting. Also, you can have Deliverance plus Thyself, you can have Deliverance plus Off the Record, you can have Deliverance plus so many strong things that make this a really, really important team perk. If you have a couple of people running Deliverance and you trick the killer into hooking one of them, the waste of time that forces on the killer and the efficiency that you as a team gain is just really hard to match. Now we move on to Circle of Healing, a disgusting perk that is by far the strongest boon in the game. You spend about 14 seconds, I believe, blessing a totem. And then you have a big area where people can heal themselves and heal others at increased speed. This increased speed absolutely stacks with perks and absolutely stacks with items, which means that you can heal yourself reliably multiple times in 22 seconds with no items, in 16 or 12 seconds with some perks, in 10 or 9 or 8 seconds with some items. It is disgusting. And the fact that you can keep setting it up is also a huge time waster for the killer. Even if the killer has high mobility and keeps finding it, every time they snuff your boon, that tells everyone that the killer is there and makes them waste their time. And remember, there's only one killer and 4 of you. So his time or their time is a lot more valuable than yours individually. So yeah, wasting the time of the killer with this is disgusting. If it's a killer that needs to injure multiple people to get value, Legion can do this, Dredge can do this, killers that want to get multiple people injured to get their power going, this perk completely stops him in the face. Not to mention that there's also spots in certain maps where you can set this up. It covers everything vertically, and the killer has to waste a lot of time getting up there to the 2nd floor to get rid of it. Circle of Healing is just really, really powerful. It also makes solo players, even uncoordinated teams, play really smart and reset their health stage going back to a safe area. This is super strong against Hag. It's super strong against Trapper. Those killers want people to be running around like headless chickens. They don't want them to heal themselves constantly and be organized. So this perk does so much for so many teams. We now move on to Prove Thyself. Prove Thyself is an interesting perk. We need to explain first exactly how generators work. If you work on a generator, you work at normal 100% efficiency. You do 100% of the normal time. If a survivor sits there with you, you are hit with a penalty of minus 15%. So instead of doing gens at 100% normal speed, you now do them at 85. Okay, not too big of a deal. If 3 survivors are there, now because you have 2, it's not minus 15, it's minus 30. And if a 4th survivor somehow joins, now it's minus 45. Well, this perk almost entirely negates those bonuses, and it applies it to everyone on the gen. So what does that really mean? If you sit on a generator from start to finish with another survivor with Prove Thyself, you save 6 seconds. Okay, not bad. Considering that it's only one perk and it affects 2 people, that's 6 seconds that 2 people are saving. So one perk from one person saves 12 seconds overall. That's really good. If you are on top of that hitting some skill checks, and on top of that, bring a toolbox or anything to the gen faster, those minus 6 seconds are very, very good. How many times you as a killer have gone to a gen with like Pop or Ruin or something to defend it, or you have Pain Resonance, you're about to trigger the perk, and bam, 1 second before you trigger that perk, the gen pops. 6 seconds on a gen is super, super crucial. But that's only 2 people. If 3 people are on a gen, instead of taking around 42 seconds, they will take instead only around 32 seconds. 10 seconds. 10 seconds on each survivor. 10 seconds 3 times, 30 seconds. One perk on one survivor makes 3 people save a collective 30 seconds worth of time. That is absolutely insane. Considering that at some point, any good team is going to start to run out of gens and there will be only 1 or 2 gen left. This perk is absolutely super, super good. On top of that, it also gives you blood points. What? It's so strong. Now, of course, if all the survivors split up perfectly and they never group up, this perk doesn't do much. But as I said, most teams eventually will converge on 1 or 2 gens and they'll try to do it fast. And this perk also allows teams to completely obliterate generators. If you spawn on a big map and you don't have corrupt intervention, there is a small chance that one of the survivors has this and some toolbox, and if they hit some skill checks, they can do a gen in 30 seconds. Without this perk, they cannot do that. They simply cannot do that. With this perk, they can. So this perk is an enabler of insane gen rushing tactics, saves decent time early and late game potentially, and gives blood point. It is a strong perk. Yeah. Some people might argue otherwise. I disagree with them, respectfully. We then move on to Dead Hard, which funnily enough might still be the best exhaustion perk in the game. It was nerfed, yes, and the way it works right now is that you press E, you do a little animation, and if the killer happens to hit you during that animation, you get a speed boost and go into deep wound, which means that you can use it repeatedly and so on. So why is this perk the best exhaustion perk in the game right now? Well, let's begin by addressing how Dead Hard used to work, right? Just checking the time, don't mind me. So the way Dead Hard used to work is that survivors could press a button and they got a little speed boost and they could use it for distance and they had iframes. That's no longer the case. You no longer get to Dead Hard through traps. You no longer get to Dead Hard through, Dr. Shocks or Slinger Spears, anything like that. You cannot do it anymore. And what old Dead Hard used to do is it made bad players a little bit better. It made average and mediocre players much harder to catch because they just had a get out of jail free card, and it made really, really strong players almost impossible to catch in a timely manner. You always had to catch them 3 times. This perk no longer works like that. This perk on a bad survivor is worthless. On an average survivor, it's meh, but on a good survivor, Dead Hard is actually still an insanely powerful perk. If you hit a survivor now, not only do they dodge the hit, they actually get a massive speed boost out of it. You can time this. You can time a good Dead Hard to dodge Artist Birds, to dodge a Hatchet, to dodge many things that you can actually react. If a killer makes the mistake of lunging from afar, you can react and press it and guarantee that you get it out. But what happens when the killer is not stupid? What happens when the killer waits it out and plays a bit better? This perk is still really, really taxing on the killer's mind. Anytime you chase a survivor that hasn't used an exhaustion perk, you will need to wait. They can do a spin in front of you and you need to wait. They can do another spin in front of you and then you hit them and bam, they hit you with Dead Hard. Very, very nasty. You need to really, really wait it out and remember the playstyle of each survivor. Even if you know that it's going to be there, even if you're willing to wait, there are situations where this perk is still really, really good. If a survivor is running tighter on a certain loop, you now no longer have to worry about 2 things. You have to worry about multiple. Before, without this perk, what you have to worry is he going to drop the pallet? Yes or no? And then you have to worry whether you want to keep chasing or hit. Now with this perk, you can no longer do that. You have to worry if they're going to keep running, if they're going to drop it, if they're going to press that hard. So there are it adds complexity to every chase and makes every chase a bit more difficult for the killer to do the right thing. And there's also situations where if they dead hard at the perfect distance, you're kind of screwed. If they dead hard right as they reach a pallet and you hit them, you give them a speed boost. If you don't hit them, they drop a pallet on your head. If you wait, they drop the pallet and now you have to break it. And now you lost your chance. So yeah, it is a perk that can still be very powerful against certain killers in many situations. And that ultimately puts the killer in a very difficult position if you really know how to use it. And obviously makes any killer that waits for it waste a little bit of time, which is really good. Reassurance is another one of those perks that has a bit of passive deterrence to it. It's not so much what it does in every game, but what it can do and what it makes the killers do in reaction to it. Before this perk came to the game, you as a killer had an almost guaranteed strategy sometimes of camping people to certain lengths to ensure that they hit stage 2 or that they died on the hook. With this perk, all of that goes out of the all of that just goes out of the window. You can no longer camp a dude for 30 seconds to make sure that they die, because on second 29, someone could come up and use this perk, and now your entire strategy is just completely crumbling apart. Because this perk adds 30 seconds to any survivor on the hook if you press it. If you give this perk to multiple people on the team, they can also ensure that one person will have it at any time and ensure that, you know, they can use it even multiple times. In endgame, you can use this to give it to a survivor that's being camped and then heal and then come back. There are so many situations where this perk, you will never have a situation where you run to a survivor and they are about to die and the killer camps them for a second, or you reach a second too late and they hit stage 2. With this perk, you basically guarantee that a survivor being camped will give the team a lot of efficiency back by doing gens if the killer decides to camp. So yeah, this perk is strong. The fact that it can stop camping and that killers have to worry about this perk, I think is what makes it so strong rather than the actual effects. Because let's be real, most of the times you're not going to have 4 people with reassurances. It's just the fact that it kills an entire strategy. If I have no way out and I know that my exit gates are going to take 80 seconds to open, I could camp a guy for one whole stage and get away with it before this perk. With this perk, I can no longer do that. If I'm Bubba and I camp a guy on the hook for 60 seconds, with this perk, it's now 90 seconds. And now they can wait out my entire no way out, open the gates, and get a 3-man out, and my camping was kind of useless. So yeah, very meta-defining perk. Then we move on to Sprint Burst, arguably also tied with Dead Hard for the strongest exhaustion perk in the game right now. Sprint Burst basically allows you to do a big sprint burst when you begin to run, and lets you get away from unsafe areas or bad positions and quickly relocate somewhere where you're not going to go down in one hit or get hit easily. It is a bit of a tricky perk that makes many people waste time while they set it up and 99 it, but it's also really strong and allows many strategies on the survivor side. If you as a killer have multiple sprint bursts, even if they are working on bad gens, if they even catch a glimpse of you coming in 1 second, now they're suddenly somewhere safe. So with sprint bursts, a survivor can work on a gen in a completely horrible area and have the knowledge that they're going to be fine pretty much no matter what. It also kills many killers that like to find grouped up survivors. Against Cannibal, you will rarely get 2 hits. Against Legion, you will rarely get multiple hits if people run sprint bursts and split the heck up. There's also a bit of intimidation that comes with sprint bursts. Anytime you chase a survivor that has sprint bursts and you know they have sprint bursts, you don't know if they're exhausted or not sometimes. And it could very well be that by the time you catch up to them and break a pallet or 2, suddenly they get a sprint burst. And now that 10-second chase that you thought you were going to close really quickly is a 5-minute chase that you can't possibly get down. Simple perk, simple to use, strong in almost every map, stronger against almost any killer. Has a few downsides, mostly the fact that you need to wait out the exhaustion a little bit, which slows down survivors, but is otherwise really powerful. And then on the very good 4-star category, we have Kindred, the best information perk in the game, probably by far. Great perk for solo players to know what the hell is happening. Big coordination teams on survivor fans, on comms, probably don't need this perk as much, but even then it's still good to see the auto of the killer. Witness Opportunity is also an insane perk. There's two things that it does that are super, super great. Number one, it lets you know if a pallet is missing and if a pallet is dropped, so that you know not to run somewhere where pallets have been gone. So it's great for solo players. And the nice thing about this perk is that it makes average loopers and average players, people that don't know the map super well, that don't know how to loop things extremely well by heart, know where to go and how to link things together. And if this perk gives you 10 extra seconds on a chase once or twice per game, it's already an insanely good perk. Obviously, some maps, the pallets are pretty stable, you don't really need it, so it's a perk that sometimes is not the most clutch, but still very good. We have Life, as well as a Balanced Landing, as well as Overcome. Also great exhaustion perks that are maybe a bit less universal, but still very, very decent. Overcome doesn't work against many killers that just hit and run and leave you. They don't really care if you get a speed boost, but it's still good and can let you make rescues and take a hit in a bad spot and then not go down immediately. Help against Save the Best for Last. It has its places where it shines. Life is pretty versatile. It allows you to get away from the killer. Similarly to Sprint Burst, but without having to hold it, which for many players it's a blessing. And Balanced Landing is really, really good, but also fails in a few maps where there's no hills. Otherwise, very solid perks. Allows you to make places that are typically bad for you, good for you. We then have a few perks that make some items even stronger. Build to Last and Streetwise are perks that by themselves are essentially worthless, but when you bring them with the best medkits or the absolute best toolboxes, they make those toolboxes even more of an issue, which is a significant deal. Hyperfocus also similarly is a bit of an insane perk that can do a gen in half the time or also do nothing at all, and it all depends on how good you are with hitting skill checks and whether or not you bring in stakeout and so on. Potentially one of the strongest perks in the game if you use it right, but tricky. Borrow Time extends your speed boost and your protection when coming out of a hook if your teammate has it, and it's a nice perk in the end game where 20 seconds basically means that anyone that gets rescued will guaranteed pretty much get out safely. So that's pretty nice. We then have For the People, an amazing perk that if used correctly can turn a game around. You can use it on a person on the ground to fully heal them. You can use it on someone that's injured that is being targeted to give them a second health state. And now if the killer comes for you, well, you've never been hooked, so you don't care. It also turns you into the Obsession, which can make Rancor and other Obsession perks a little bit harder for the killer to use. We also have Distortion, a perk from Jeff that is absolutely underrated. It blocks the auto reading from the killer and can let you deduce what perks and add-ons the killer is using so that you can tell your teammates. It's not one of those perks that you want to use as a solo, but a perk that you use as a team. You can tell the killer, you can tell that the killer has Lethal Pursuer and call it out. Tell that the killer has Barbecue and Chili and call it out. Tell that the killer has a certain add-on and call it out to your teammates. And obviously, while you do that, you also don't leave scratch marks and you're invisible to the killer's auto reading. Awesome perk. Resilience is a cute perk that makes you do gens a bit faster, vault faster, open gates faster, do everything faster, self-heal faster. Good stuff. Nothing absolutely insane by itself, but it adds up. Decisive Strike, many people scoff at. This perk has been nerfed. It no longer stuns the killer for very long. It's not 5 seconds, it's only 3 seconds. And it doesn't work in endgame. So is this perk any good? Yes, it's still very, very good. If you have Decisive, Off the Record, and something like Dead Hard, you can be so hard to tunnel. If you get chased by the killer repeatedly after on hook, you can use Off the Record, take 1 extra hit, then use Decisive, which is like another extra hit, and then you lose the mending status effect, so you can then use Dead Hard to take 3 extra hits. That can be pretty insane. Admittedly, against killers like Nurse, it is very difficult to get away from this, and this might only buy your team 6 or 8 or 9 seconds, but still, 6 or 8 or 9 seconds, buying that time to everyone else is still very, very huge. That can be the difference between a gem being 90% and a gem being done. So please don't sleep on Decisive. It's still a very, very good perk. Killers don't really respect it anymore. So if you hit a killer with Decisive that's trying to take you out of the game early, they will feel it, especially if your team is there to do the gens or come and take hits for you. Wiretap and Alert are nice info perks. I think Alert is ideal for solo players to know where pallets are being dropped and to avoid those areas and know which killer it is. And wiretap is nice. If a killer is around you and you have a good gen and you activate this perk, everyone else will know that the killer is around you and do what they need to do safely. And you also be able to see them through walls, which is kind of like a hack in itself. Really, really powerful. It's a really, really nice perk when it works. Obviously, doesn't work against every killer. Bond is a top tier information perk. It is a bit of a replacement to Kindred or other info perks to know what your teammates are doing. If you know exactly where they are, it's easier to line up flashy saves. It's easier to go and save them with different perks, the hits for them. It's a nice info perk. Bodily Knowledge has a downside if you use medkits, but otherwise it's an insane perk. It lets you heal very, very quickly. If you are inside a boon, you can heal yourself in about 16, 12, 13 seconds. Very, very crazy stuff depending on the skill 6 you hit. Awesome perk. Inner Strength conflicts a little bit with boons, but it's still an amazing perk to heal yourself through any mangled or slowdown perk. Awesome. We're Gonna Live Forever is a solid perk as well to heal people on the ground extremely fast. By the way, this will be better in the next update. And also potentially giving them the endurance status effect. A bit tricky to use, but this perk against certain killers like Twins is an absolute god tier perk. And then we have Will Make It, a perk that lets you heal a person under the hook in 8 seconds. That's great. If you heal them in 8 seconds and the killer comes and takes a hit, well, 10-second base kit BT, they're fine. If they don't, well, now they're healed. And then you can use that speed boost on other people as well. Will Make It is pretty great. It just gets overshadowed by medkits and other storm healing perks like Circle of Healing. And that's about it for the strongest perks in the game. Don't forget that you have all of this down in the description in picture form and whatnot. And maybe someday I'll make a video covering all of the perks again and explain them all in detail. In the meantime, you can watch the old one if you like. So, what is the conclusion? Nothing really. The strong perks are strong. Hopefully now you understand why. Hopefully I didn't miss out on anything super important. And the perks that are not at the top are still very usable and still very good. And almost all of them have something to offer with the right teamwork as a survivor or on the right killer if you pick the appropriate perks on them. And yeah, that's about it. You let me know what you think. And don't forget, sometime in the future, there will be an update, presumably. We've seen this in the notes, check the previous video, where survivors will be able to pick themselves up from the ground. And the killer will immediately win the game if they down everyone at once. I expect that in this patch, that will make insta-down perks a bit stronger. It will make anti-slugging perks a little bit stronger on the survivor side. It will make information perks to snowball, like Infectious Fire, a little bit stronger. But almost anything else, I think, will remain roughly the same. So hopefully this tier list is useful for a long while. And if not, well, we'll be here to make videos about it. Thank you so much for watching. And this time for real, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.